and welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast series. I'm Nina Lockwood, founder and director of Intuitive Interim and Executive Search. Throughout this series, I will be sharing engaging conversations with talented leaders from across the UK transport sector. I'm delighted to welcome Simon Pearson, Chief Commercial Officer for FirstBus, to this episode of the Intuitive Insights podcast. Simon shares his career story from rail into bus and gives us some positive news in terms of the change and transformation that's taking place in the bus industry at the moment. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Simon Pearson, good morning, Chief Commercial Officer for FirstBus. It's an absolute joy and a pleasure to welcome you onto the podcast. You've been teasing me for a bit, saying, are we going to do it? Are we not going to do it? And here you are this morning. I'm absolutely delighted to see you. Welcome.
Thanks, Nina. Really pleased to be here eventually.
Fantastic. So in good old Intuitive Insights fashion, I'm going to ask you to share your career story with us, Simon. And what we know from the 40 odd episodes of this podcast that we've now done is that this is the bit where people get their inspiration from in terms of where people's careers have started and the current role that they're doing and everything in between in terms of, okay, that's what a career in the UK transport industry can look like. I've never worked in an industry where people have got so much passion for what they do. And having had a few conversations with yourself now, I know that you share that passion too. So I'm looking forward to hearing your story. I'm going to hand over to you and ask you to take us back right to the very beginning in terms of leaving education and making a decision in terms of what your career was going to look like, where you've been, what you've done, and tell us something about the job that you're doing now.
Okay, thanks, Nina. So, I've had 24 years in public transport, which frightens me most of the time. But and that 24 years has been equally split between intercity rail and FirstBus. If I go right back to the beginning, it was an accidental entry into transport. I never had a kind of passion for it as a child or anything like that. I had a relatively working class background in Carlisle, which is where I grew up. I was always reasonably bright at school. My dad died when I was 16. That was a kind of a big point in my life, and I think kind of like A levels and university following that, I was probably more interested in enjoying myself rather than being academic. So I probably underachieved at university, got a 2-2. And I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I had a Saturday job in Woolworths selling records when I was right through from 16 to 21, and I applied to go on their management training scheme. When I left uni, didn't get in, but I did get in at WH Smith, and I got 2 weeks notice to say that I was being sent to Bradford.
Oh my goodness!
My first entry into the world of work was WH Smith, Bradford. And then it got moved around a couple of branches in Yorkshire. And I ended up in Pontefract, and I was there for 2 years. And I think and I guess that's relevant because I used to commute from a place called Farsley in between Bradford and Leeds to Pontefract, and I needed to get 2 buses and a train every day there and back.
Right.
And it wasn't the greatest commute. And I used to think in my head, God, this could be a lot better. It was freezing. The train was either absolutely packed or absolutely empty, and it didn't quite work for me.
Wasn't flowing.
And one day, and I think this is probably the back end of 1998, when I'd been there for about 2 years, I saw an advert back in the days when jobs were advertised in the Yorkshire Post. It was an advert for a yield manager at GNER. I didn't know what a yield manager was, but it said they wanted somebody with a mathematical background who could forecast demand, and I did a degree in maths. Right. And I thought it looked quite interesting, so I applied and I got that job. And I started in York in February 1999. Right. My job really was, it was before any kind of automated revenue management systems came in place, but my job was to forecast demand on trains and work out where to put the cheap tickets. And we were basically doing it in Excel spreadsheets and old green screen reservation systems. But it was good. And I entered GNER. I didn't really know much about GNER, but it was owned by Sea Containers. They ran the Orient Express and other luxury kind of transport operations across the world. and it was very, very much about kind of, the customer experience. And it was a really good grounding for me in kind of, what you can do for customers. And I think G&ER, it was led by Christopher Garnett at the time, who was the chief executive, and he was really inspirational. And right from the off, the role really kind of got to understand what it meant for customers and how your role impacted customers.
Right.
So my entry was going out and spending time at stations and going on trains before I started doing anything around forecasting demand. And I guess there's a couple of really key learning experiences in those first few months that have stuck with me for a long time. I guess the first thing was, like, even in my first few weeks, I got sent to King's Cross, and just to experience what really busy trains felt like. Because my job was to kind of make sure that train didn't get overcrowded, and we kind of spread the demand out, as well as making sure that we kind of earned a bit more money from from people who were prepared to pay a bit more as well. Yeah. So just standing on those platforms and experiencing what a train with 700 people on felt like, it kind of really kind of resonated that actually if you get it wrong, it has an impact on people.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuck with me. And then I guess probably in about April, May 19, it must have been April, and I'd been there for a few weeks and I was getting into it. And we used to adjust the prices. And Newcastle United had made it through to the quarter-final of the FA Cup. And if they won the game, they would then be going to Wembley for the first time in ages for them. Right. So I thought I was being smart, and I went into the office on a Saturday before this match had finished, and I, about 5 minutes before the game finished, knowing that Newcastle were going to win, I knocked all the cheap tickets off, and increased all the fares on the trains, because I knew that the trains would be really, really busy, and I thought I was doing the right thing. But then, sort of like a few days later, I think the headline on the front page of the paper was rail company rips off Newcastle fans or something like that, because all of the tickets had gone. So I kind of, on one level, I was doing my job, but I hadn't learned the lesson that kind of there's an expectation in public transport. It's kind of a public service. It's private companies running a public service to an extent, and there's an expectation that you do things for the community, and it's not always just about kind of the micro decision. It's a wider piece around kind of what what matters to the communities and society that you serve. So I got a real lesson there.
That's a salutary lesson, that one, wasn't it?
Yeah, we ended up putting on more trains, and we offered cheap tickets on those ones. So that was a real lesson. And
how did that? So I'd never met Chris Garnett, but I know of him by reputation, and people often refer back to his leadership style in a very similar way to Chris Green, where they both kind of got how important the customer experience was, way ahead of the curve in terms of the leadership style that they had, how people centric that was, not just in terms of the customer, but also in terms of the team that worked for them as well on the service. What was Chris's reaction? I mean, I'm assuming he got to know about your lesson, but did he react in any way, shape, or form?
Do you know what? I don't know, because I was in the grand scheme of things, I was a minion at that point.
Okay.
I was many layers away. Christopher Garnett, he no doubt did, but he certainly never kind of said anything to me about it.
I mean, that's a really good thing, isn't it? It can't have been that bad, because I'm sure you would have known about it.
Yeah, and it was it's something I've taken with me. But he was I mean, G&ER, it was always about doing the right thing, and we, particularly when things went wrong, we just used to kind of put customers in hotels and get them to where they needed to be. And I think at one point we were at or close to the bottom of the kind of like operational performance for stats, but we were at the top of the customer satisfaction one, which is
okay, really, that is some doing, isn't it?
And that was a time, that was in the early stages of rail privatization, and G&ER had got in there early, and it was making a lot of money, and it could afford to do it. But it was very much about the customer experience. This back in the days when you had still had the kind of like restaurants in first class, and it was a really good product.
Yeah. So a good grounding in terms
grounding.
of learning, steep learning curves early doors.
Yeah, and I think early doors in my career at GNR, I was there when we had the two rail crashes. The first one at Hatfield in kind of, I think it was October 2000, and then the Selby rail crash, which was only a few months afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, that's when the business really kind of like pulled together, and it was really, really visible at that point when you were doing well for customers, and everything was geared around doing the right thing again.
Yeah,
but
and rebuilding confidence.
I remember after Hatfield, because my job was about stimulating demand, and we had lots of busy trains. We also had lots of empty trains as well. And after Hatfield, I don't know if you remember, but there was months where there was speed restrictions across the whole rail network, and passenger numbers just declined enormously because journey times were so long. But we had a promotion when we came back to full speed where we offered £5 fares, and it was only for a week, I think, but we managed to fill every single seat on every single one of our trains at a £5. And that really kind of taught me that there was this real kind of like underlying demand for rail travel. I mean, we had some really good destinations on the East Coast, like kind of York, Edinburgh, Newcastle, places people wanted to go. But it taught me that you could kind of turn the demand on a bit. And I think we got lots of feedback from customers during that time when we offered tickets for a £5, that from people who'd never been to London before or never really travelled out. So we kind of opened up the railway to a group of people who'd maybe never used it before. And I think that kind of stuck with me as well, that kind of you can really make a difference to people's lives sometimes without really realizing it.
Yeah,
but I think that kind of that evidence that you could get lots of people onto the railway really kind of paved the way for what we were doing with revenue management. And I think after being there a couple of years, I changed roles lots of times, all within commercial. But I had a role which was bringing in an automated revenue management system. This was basically forecasting demand at an individual train level and adjusting the ticket prices. And what that told us is that we should really be offering kind of more tickets at a cheaper rate. And we did that, and we sold lots of tickets. There was a bit of a kind of had to take a bit of a brave jump, I guess, in terms of doing that, because there was a bit of a tendency to not go too cheap. But we managed to continue that kind of like that growth curve and get lots of people traveling on the trains. We really kind of simplified the whole range of advanced products. We opened up first class a lot more. I think kind of 20 years ago, you had to either be buying a really full price first class ticket, or you had to stay away on a Saturday night. So we did lots of work to kind of simplify the fares. I know we obviously didn't get to utopia from fare simplification, but we did a lot there and generated a lot of demand. And we eventually kind of got to that sweet spot where you knew you could turn it on, and we had a database of customers. We could email them, we could discount the fares, we could switch it back off again on a Sunday, and we could just generate kind of £1 million over the weekend when we needed to with that technology.
It sounds like kind of quite early on with that technology. So being involved, that feels like at that point that was quite cutting edge, this automated revenue management system. And also, we hear a lot now about the importance of data and how we don't have enough data, or the data we have we're not doing anything with. But you just shared a brilliant example from 20 odd years ago of using that customer data that was available, emailing them about the fares and so on. So quite kind of ahead of its time in terms of that customer contact. I'm trying to think when it must have been kind of, I guess, between maybe 25, 26 years ago when Tesco did the loyalty card. Do you remember? It was kind of the first of its kind. And we all think, oh, this is brilliant because you're going to get some money off your shopping, without actually realising that they're gathering all your personal data at the same time to make sure that commercially they were going to be doing things that served them as well as served us as a customer. So that work that you were doing then, with that kind of the automation and the use of the data, is quite cutting edge, wasn't it?
I think it was certainly cutting edge in the rail industry. It was way short of what
Exactly.
Tesco were
Yeah.
But it allowed us to, kind of like mitigate risks by offering things only to certain groups of customers.
Yeah.
And after I'd spent a bit of time in kind of revenue management and pricing, and kind of experienced those early years of G&ER, the franchise, as the original franchise, came to an end, and G&ER then won a new franchise where it went through a kind of like rail bidding round, and I think it was awarded the second of its franchises in 2005. But it was a very, very different business model,
Right.
because it could no longer afford to have that complete freedom with what it was doing for customers, and it was much more about efficiency, because you demonstrated that you'd got the growth, and there's a lot more evidence around what we could get from the franchise. So as part of that franchise bid, and I wasn't involved in the bid, but there was a whole piece in there around the retailing strategy.
Right.
And I guess that was the early conversations around kind of reducing kind of headcount in travel centres, moving people towards fast ticket machines, moving people towards the internet, and addressing kind of some of the third party costs with travel agents and so on. So I got landed with this enormous project to completely change the distribution and retailing model in the business.
Right. Fascinating.
Well, one of the things we did there was we designed our own website, and we were the first train operator to move away from using the trainline.com.
Right.
Back then everybody was using the Trainline, and we kind of went off on our own, and we had to build a really, really good website, and we did that, and it was still in use, and I think bits of it still are in use today, and this was 14 or 15 years ago, but we had to make it really simple for customers to find the right fare for them, and we offered discounted pricing if you came through gner.co.uk. And one of the reasons for that was what you've just said, Nina, which was to make sure that we kind of kept the relationship with the customer, and we had them in our database to send those emails and get those sales up. So that was a really kind of challenging period. It was my kind of first interaction with trade unions, and there's quite a lot of hurdles we had to jump through at an industry level to change the commission rates for travel agents and third-party operators and so on as well. But we succeeded, and over that time we saw a dramatic shift from kind of travel shops into the internet, and away from telephone call centres into the internet as well, and onto fast ticket machines. So that was good. And then, but I think kind of Sea Containers had sort of like wider issues. It had a kind of managed exit out of the franchise early, towards, I think that was during 2006, and then National Express took over in 2007. So I had a slightly different role with them. I had a role briefly in a kind of a wider role in National Express, but mainly focused on East Coast. And then in 2008, the kind of financial crisis struck, and that whole franchise bid was based on kind of delivering strong year-on-year growth, and the numbers just collapsed overnight at the back end of 2008, and that then led to kind of National Express kind of exiting that franchise, and we went into the operator of last resort as East Coast, and that was headed up by kind of Elaine Holt at the time, and we had a kind of good couple of years trying to get back onto a kind of a customer focused track again. And then, I guess having done all of those various commercial roles and worked as part of a really good team through the various iterations, I thought I needed to start doing something else. And I'd known Giles Fernley. Giles at the time I think he was the chairman of Grand Central Railways. And, we'd been having some dialogue with him around retailing in travel shops, because we had to be impartial. So I'd got to know Giles quite well through that process, and he left Grand Central and he went and took on the job as MD of the bus division in FirstGroup.
Right.
And I think if you'd asked me back then, did I want to work for FirstGroup, I'd have probably thought twice about it, because it had a bit of a reputation for not always being customer focused and maybe being a bit kind of like short-term focused and a bit ruthless sometimes.
Yeah.
I think it was the very first issue of Passenger Transport magazine. There was an interview with Giles, and I think Tim O'Toole had come in as the new CEO of FirstGroup, and it was very much about a transformation and a culture change in that business. And I thought it was interesting. So I sent a speculative CV off into First Buzz, see if there's any roles going. Never heard anything back for months, and then I bumped into Giles at King's Cross Station. He was running for a train, and I said, "Oh, by the way, I sent in a speculative CV," and he said, "Oh, leave that with me." And the following day, I got a phone call from Dave Alexander, who was the MD of the North of England, and we had a coffee, and that was my entry into the bus division,
into the bus world, right?
Yeah, and it was interesting because I never really. I didn't think I was going to stay in bus for a long time. I wanted to do something a bit different.
Okay.
I was looking at maybe a commuter talk or something like that, but I never really anticipated staying in bus for more than a couple of years,
right,
to be honest. And loads of people in rail said to me, "What are you doing going to work in buses?" And I think there's a bit of a, I think there's a little bit of a snobbery thing between rail and bus sometimes. Maybe not so much now. But certainly there's a lot of people saying, it's really hard, it's really tough. People are only paying £1. It's very different. It was a very different model to Intercity Rail, where it was all business travel and leisure travel and a very low commuter base. But I kind of got warned off. But I think right from the off, I found bus really, really interesting. And I started off in a role as commercial director for the North of England, working for Dave and working with a bunch of really good people there.
Yeah.
And
I think you're right, Simon. Do you know, in terms of this snobbery, so I've been around in the transport sector for just coming up to 11 years. And I would say, well, there's kind of two things here. In terms of FirstGroup and reputationally, then yes, I'm with you on that. 11 years ago, when I was starting to get to know the industry, I would say to people, who would you like to work for? And who would you actually not want to work for? And FirstGroup were falling into that latter category quite often because of everything that you said in terms of reputation. But we have definitely seen that transformation over time. So the work that was being done at that point, I think, has paid dividends. Definitely the snobbery around the rail and the bus bit. But again, I completely agree with you. I think that's starting to change and has been for the last 2 or 3 years. And maybe the catalyst for that was the fact that going through the global pandemic and the rail industry all of a sudden getting a bit, it's hard. We've got to win people back onto the railway. We've got to win new passengers onto the railway, not just win back the people we had before. And so those commercial skills that you've always needed on the bus side of transport became even more important in rail. So I think the skills transfer between both parts actually started to kind of up the interest level quite significantly. That would be my view anyway. So I think, yes, there was the snobbery, but we're seeing less of that now, much less, and much more interest and fascination in terms of, so how does the bus industry work then? Because you've always had to be so much more commercial. In my view.
That's right. It's way more agile, and you can plan something, have an idea, and it can be implemented within kind of 3 months. Which is a much shorter timescale than anything that was ever possible in rail.
Oh God! For timescales that quick pace.
Yeah, and I think the thing that became really obvious in bus is they really matter to people. Way more people use the bus than use any other form of public transport in the UK, particularly in the areas outside London where we operate. We've got about heading towards 1.5 million kind of trips a day, just in First Bus. So it's a huge number of people traveling, and when we get it right, it really kind of improves the day. And when we get it wrong, it can have a big impact. And it's not just about, if you and I are late for work, we can probably get away with it because we're both sat in our home offices at the moment. But if you're working in a shift, or if you're working in a hospital or something, you've got to turn up day in, day out. So it's really, really important that
really matters.
that we run a reliable service that people can trust. That's not always easy. In fact, it's very rarely easy, but it makes a difference, and it makes a difference to the communities that we serve.
Yeah.
People using the buses for all sorts of things. When I went in, I kind of fully expected that the majority of people on the bus were going to and from work, but that's not the case. It's we've got lots and lots of young people in education. We've got a lot of older people using the bus, and we've got a lot of people using the bus to go to town, see their friends, go shopping. It's not just a commuting thing at all. And it's it's really sorry, lost my train of thought briefly there, Nina.
That's all right. It's all right.
But I think there's a real opportunity now to change how people perceive buses. I'm going off my career track here and start talking about where I am now. But I'll come back to it. Don't worry.
That's all right. It's all good, Simon. Don't worry.
But I think you've got. I think there's some really positive tailwinds in the industry. I think there's a net zero, regardless of kind of where today's politics are changing at a kind of on a day-to-day basis. Net zero is here. The bus has got to be part of the solution there in terms of kind of delivering that at a national level. You've got some real advances in technology which make it far easier for people to kind of plan bus journeys and then use the bus. So we can track where buses are, we can display them on a map. Customers are now used to seeing what they experience with Uber and so on a daily basis, and we've got we can replicate that and give people real confidence about where the buses are, minimize the things people don't like so much, like waiting at bus stops, put people in control of their journeys and give them the confidence that they're going to do that. And I think with attitudinal changes, particularly amongst younger people who are more environmentally conscious, we can there's some real kind of momentum, I think, to kind of getting people to change their attitudes. And I think we in First, we're going to be doing a lot of work around the brand of the bus and I guess the brand of the bus industry, not just First Bus, to really kind of try and change those perceptions and make people love the bus again.
There's a lot of work to be done there, but the fact that you're saying that I love this and the brand of the bus, it's kind of to get people back into. If I think about the bus that I used to go on when I was going to early doors of starting work and travelling from Leyland to Preston on the Jimmy Fishwick 111, and I can still smell the bus because those days you were still able to smoke on the bus. I can still kind of feel the ticket. You used to get this little yellow ticket when you got on, and it wasn't a fancy way to travel. I didn't have a car, so I either did that or walked a mile and a half to get to the train station. So I got the bus. It was easier. And also during the winter when everyone had their lights on and the curtains on, then I could have a right good nosy from the top deck into everybody's houses, which was always a benefit for me. But that kind of the brand of the bus, people having used it when they were younger, getting us back on it again. I think the apps have been brilliant for that. When I'm in London, I use the City Mapper app. And the fact that it tells me exactly how to get to the bus stop, so where I need to be, then gives me the real-time information about when the bus is due to arrive. And then once I'm on the bus, it's telling me which stop is next. So I know. One of my things around kind of lack of confidence of traveling is how do I know when I've got to stand up to get off? And all of the app is just brilliant at that. I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's given me the confidence to get on the bus in London, which I have never done before. So the last couple of years, that's how I've been traveling around rather than on the underground. And again, it's much more interesting than being underground anyway.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing more and more people do that. And you talked earlier when we talked about rail about the importance of data, and I guess one of the things that's happened in the bus industry over the last 5 or so years is our customers have gone from being largely anonymous people who throw a coin in a box and get on the bus, to people who are paying with mobile phones via the app or paying with a contactless card, either just to get a ticket or through some sort of kind of like tap and cap program.
Yeah.
Majority of our customers now we can see kind of how frequently they're traveling and so on. And I think one thing we are seeing is that we've got way more individuals than we maybe previously thought who are traveling, and that means there's an opportunity to get people to make a few more trips. Yes. It's not about getting people to kind of like sell their BMW. That would be nice, but the opportunity is getting people to make smart choices about certain journeys and getting them to use the bus where that's the sensible thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I think what you just said there in terms of you use City Mapper, you can do it with Google Maps or our app. You can just see what you need to do, and you can make that choice there and then.
Yeah,
you can go and do it. And if
easy
all
to
you need
use.
to do is tap your phone and sit down, that makes it even easier. And all of these kind of like the barriers that have existed for many years are, that there's the potential there for them to disappear.
Yeah, and as you've said, that word confidence is really important. I mean, I can hear in your voice, we started kind of talking about right at the beginning of this conversation around the passion for the industry that people have, and you can clearly hear that in your voice in terms of the passion you've got for building this brand of the bus and getting people to use that as a different way of travelling to how they might be doing it. So there's been commercial. The word commercial has gone all the way through your career to that kind of commercial director role when you came into First Bus, up to chief commercial officer role now. So what does that mean in a kind of week in the life of Simon Pearson? What does that chief commercial officer title mean that you do? What's the job?
I've probably got 3 or 4. I've probably got 3 main bits of my job, I would say. So I sit on the exec team within First Bus. So a big part of my role is just kind of working with my colleagues about the strategy of the business. So the bus MD now is Jeanette Bell. She took over from Giles a couple of years ago, I think, maybe a little bit longer than that. Right. And she's, she is really, really good leader. She's came from P&O Ferries before they had their kind of much publicised kind of union issues, but she's got customer and people running through her veins, and that is going right through the organisation. Got a guy called Kevin Green. He's our chief people officer, and he's had a senior varied career in HR, but he was previously a kind of HR director in Royal Mail. So he's really driving a kind of like a people focus through the business. Isabel joined us as a chief sustainability officer. She's driving our decarbonisation agenda. So I guess there's some new blood in the exec team. Yeah. And then you've got me, Andrew, and Colin, who are my kind of other colleagues who are probably kind of more experienced transport professionals. And we've got a guy called Gary who's looking at Gary Hitchmo. He's looking at the growth agenda. So I've got really good balance on there in terms of kind of how we're running the business. And so I spend a lot of time with them. So I had a couple of days away with that group last week, looking at kind of what we're prioritizing for the next year and how we're functioning as a team. And that was a good couple of days away in Cheshire. I guess tomorrow I've got a day with the commercial directors from our kind of local business units. So they report into the MDs, but there's 5 or 6 of those, and we're working on our kind of commercial priorities for next year, and particularly how we make sure that kind of what we're doing at a strategic level from the group and from the centre in Bus is kind of filtering through to the kind of the operations on the ground. So that's primarily about us making sure that we've got our priorities right, and we've got the resources in the right places to deliver everything. We've got a couple of couple of programs ongoing at the moment. We've talked about the brand work. That's work in development, and we're spending a lot of time focusing on that, and we're going to be launching that early next year, I would
Brilliant.
say.
Great. Watch this space.
And we're doing a lot of work around customer experience at the moment as well. We've just completed a piece of work with some external specialists, and we've researched 13,000 of our customers and looking at kind of, what is it that's really important to them, and where are we performing well and where are we not, and we're looking for the gaps for, what are the things that we really need to focus on where we're not delivering so well, but it's something that's really, really important to our customers. And one of the things there is making sure that the importance of this data, what you just described, making sure that it's accurate day in, day out, so that they can trace it. And that's a key thing there. And then I've got my own team. So I've got a kind of central team in First with kind of 20 odd people in it as well. And we're looking at pricing. We're looking at how we better deliver networks. We're looking at things like how we forecast journey times, and that's a really kind of interesting development with technology as well, because we're getting a signal every 10 seconds from our bosses, so we know exactly where they all are, so we can work out, I guess, the variability in journey running time. And that is the big pain point in the bus industry, I think, is congestion on the roads. And we get a lot of stick as operators for running late, or buses bunching, or wherever else it might be. But the root cause of the vast majority of that is congestion and variable running times. And if you drive around anywhere, you'll know that at certain times of day or certain days a week, one day it might take you 10 minutes, or one day it might take you 20. And
exactly.
So and the challenge is how do you timetable a bus to run accurately there? If you put too much time in, you cheese off all the customers because they're sat waiting at bus stops. If you don't put enough in, the bus is always late. So the technology is really trying to kind of forecast that variability and create timetables which will, which are much more deliverable.
Right. I wouldn't have a clue where to start there, which is a good job that there are very clever people who do know how to start. I feel, and it might all be relative, because of the pandemic, when there was very, very little traffic on the roads, it feels to me now that there is a lot more traffic on the roads than we had pre-pandemic. But as I say, it might just be relative. But I was going into Manchester, it's quite a few months ago now. The vast majority of my journeys into Manchester are on the train. Because that's my preferred method, not least because the car parking in Manchester is so extortionately expensive. But the other bit is the congestion. It's quicker and easier to go on the train. But I had to drive in this particular day. I'm going in on one of the main roads into Manchester on the A580, and Transport for Greater Manchester have got various signs as you go down the road. These kind of matrix signs. And this particular sign, and I can't quote it exactly because I can't remember the exact wording of it, was basically, don't be moaning about the traffic, you are the traffic.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like really took me back, as if kind of like, I'm kind of looking around, what are these people doing here? Why are they all driving into Manchester? Why is all this traffic? And it's like, yes, because we are the traffic. And that's these kind of key messages that are quite simple, but do need reiterating over and over again, because there are different methods, and making it easier for people to choose those different methods and getting people out of the cars and onto a bus, and so saving all of this space on the road network is key. But that building the brand first, I think,
and most of the people at that particular time were probably kind of single occupancy cars.
Yes.
They're taking up a hell of a lot of road space that could be given over to buses. Not everybody there would be able to have a convenient public transport alternative, but a hell of a lot of them would have been.
Yeah.
And if we can get a chunk of those people out and onto the bus, and at the same time get some sensible long-term decisions around road space from politicians, that would be where we see a real kind of like transformation in modal shift.
So this is taking, I'm feeling now, I'm the itch to get my magic wand out to move us into the next part of the podcast conversation, which is around your three wishes. So much of what you're doing in the day job is working on the business rather than in it, having those strategic conversations about what are we doing that's working, where are the gaps that we need to fill in terms of our customer expectations and what we're delivering, how do we make this better for the people who work with us and travel with us. So all of that amazing stuff. If I was to give you three wishes and wave my magic wand and say, Simon, you can change three things in the UK transport industry or in the bus industry specifically, what would those three things be in order to make a big difference and get people traveling?
I focused on the bus industry on this one, I think, and we've probably touched on all of them so far. But I think the first one for me would be for the industry to move on from kind of ideological conversations around ownership and start focusing more on the opportunity to grow bus customers and work together to do that.
Right. Yeah.
There's franchising isn't a panacea, and there are opportunities for operators and local authorities in lots of different models. But I guess what's consistent through all of them is that we've got to work together and make some, kind of choices around, where we invest and where we operate services to deliver good services that will have the biggest impact on modal shift and, kind of improve the lives for the majority of people. And I think kind of getting out of this argument of them and us is a key thing that I'd like to see change if I had a magic wand.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, do you know what? That doesn't rely on or shouldn't rely on the political debate, or shouldn't actually rely on financial restrictions. This is about people working with people and collaborating for everybody's good, because there are enough passengers to go round. There are enough people sat in their cars on the A580 going into Manchester to spread out and get people on using different types of transport.
Well, so absolutely, and it doesn't take a big shift out of all of the people travelling on cars to have a big impact on the public transport sector and a big impact on the congestion and the capacity in the road network.
Yeah. So wish number one, everybody works closer together, more collaboratively, and in terms of achieving that modal shift. You've got two more wishes left in me wand.
The second one was to have a kind of a longer term approach on investment and funding into the industry. And I think there's long-term aspirations, but I guess short-term needs often get in the way. And so for example, at the moment we've got really good funding for £2 bus fares, which is driving some growth, but it's not driving growth in all markets, and it's not particularly targeted at the people that need it the most. It's good to stimulate some overall growth, but what's the long-term objective, and how do we exit that, and how do we make sure that the funding that is available for the bus industry is targeted in the right place so that we can make the right decisions now for a better future. So I'd like to see that kind of more joined up long-term approach, and that's probably kind of a transport approach rather than just buses.
Yeah, agreed. And unfortunately, we are relying on the politicians somewhat for that one, aren't we? So good job. I've got a magic wand. Number three.
And the third one, I mean, I touched on it earlier when my experiences when I moved from rail to bus, but magic wand, I would change the perception of the bus industry. And I think it's a really great place to work. It does a hell of a lot for society, but it's kind of gets bashed a bit too much. And I think it does really important things that matter, but it's often on the kind of it takes a beating
Yeah.
too often. And I think from a perception perspective, it's I found it a more interesting than I did in rail, to be honest. And I'd like to see more people have that attitude. And I think we will do that with the work we're doing on brand. But with a magic wand, I'd like that to be happening tomorrow, so that we had
sooner.
a flood of people wanting to come and be part of the journey and drive our buses and do other roles in the business.
Certainly from the experience that we've had working with the bus industry over the last 3 or 4 years and doing more of that now than we've ever done, then the conversations that my team are having with prospective candidates, we are definitely seeing that shift in terms of this is an exciting place to be. And I think when you've got a starting point where you can see the amount of potential that there is to be part of change and transformation in an industry and making something better, which actually matters. And that is a common thread that goes through every single person that I've ever spoken to who works in the transport industry. We're here to make things better. And yes, it's about getting people from A to B, but it's so much more than that in terms of where they start and where they finish their journey. What are they traveling for? It's not about a journey on a bus or a train. It's actually, yes, I'm going on a first date, or I'm going to go and visit someone in hospital, or I'm going to go and spend an evening with my friends in having a meal, going to the theatre, whatever it is. We are providing a means to an end, and we have got that sense of purpose in this industry, which is one of the reasons I love it so much.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Absolutely.
3 wishes. So thank you for those. In terms of inspiration, Simon, people get their inspiration and motivation from lots of different places. And we're a nosy old crowd on the Intuitive Insights podcast. And I always love to ask people, is there something that kind of you go to? If you're having a day where you feel like, do you know what, I need plugging in, I need recharging, I need inspiring, what do you do? How do you get that inspiration?
I've probably not got something which is an absolute go-to every time. I like being with people. I kind of, I struggle when I'm kind of sat behind a PC all day. I can't do that all day. So I like bouncing ideas and thoughts off my team. In terms of outside of work, though, I guess I'd probably, I listen to a few podcasts. I try to read a lot. I kind of struggle with that at the moment, actually, but I do try and read a lot, and I've got a little bookshelf in our office at work of books I've read that I think people will benefit from. But I really like to understand kind of what motivates people's behaviour. My favourite book's probably one by a guy called Daniel Kahneman, who was a kind of behavioural kind of economist. And it was all about kind of the hidden things that make people kind of do what they do, and the trade-offs that they make and the choices that they make. And a lot of that was around, kind of the whole stuff around nudge theory and everything came out of there. So I get a bit geeky on that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
I'm more interested in what makes people tick, and learning more in that space, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't have I haven't got anything written on my wall that motivates me or anything like that.
Right. But I tend to do a mix of things. I think your point is a really good one. That some days it can be for me. It'll be like, I've just got to stop. I've got to get away from the screen, and I'm just going to get the dogs and go out for a walk. And that's kind of re-energizes me, refocuses me. I get my energy from people. So if I've not been out and about, and it's a very, very rare that this happens, but if I've had 2 or 3 days during the week where I'm in the office, sat at my desk, then I get really kind of twitchy, and I'm like, no, I need to be with people, and not just on a screen either. It's a good kind of second best, but being with people physically and being out and about and meeting with clients and candidates is one of my favorite things to do. But I'm also, you can see loads of books behind me. I've got so many books on different subjects. And, sometimes it's a case of just looking at the shelf, thinking, right, which one is speaking to me? Pull it off, open it up, and then read whatever is there and kind of leave it to the lap of the gods in terms of what I've chosen to pick up. But yeah, we'll get it from different places. But I think people is a common theme again in terms of being with other people, being inspired by them, helping other people and therefore kind of giving rather than expecting to get back is also an energizing factor for me.
Yeah, and you learn stuff from all sorts of people, don't you? And we at our management conference 6 months or so ago, maybe a little bit longer, we had Jake Humphries and Professor Damien Hughes who did a
oh wow
they did an hour with our wider leadership team, and they're the people who run the kind of high performance podcast.
Yeah, I love that. One of my favourites.
Right, okay, yeah, and they're really down to earth, but they bring out examples from people you wouldn't necessarily expect. So they've got industry leaders and sports people and so on there as well. But there's some real great examples from, I think she's called Vicky Patterson, who's like reality TV star and so on, about how they kind of like manage their lives and how they you know, kind of how they kind of get their own self-worth, sense of purpose and so on. So all of that's really, really interesting. And I think in First, I think with Kevin in particular, we've done a lot of work on purpose, and we've you know, got new values which we've kind of like built from the ground up, and you know, we're sticking with them, and I think, you know, kind of, you know, living by those and, you know, being values driven, I think is important to the leadership team here.
Yeah, it's massive, and that's coming out certainly, you know, kind of working with First across the group, but specifically the work that we've done with you in Bus is that you can't swap your values every year. It's not something, it's kind of, all right, it's annual business planning time. What values shall we have this year? Because that's not how it works, is it? It's kind of intrinsic to who we are as an organisation, and we stick to those. And there might be different kind of things that we want to achieve each year, but they keep bringing us back to the values. And that for us, when we're working in terms of talent attraction into any organisation, the clearer you can be on your values as a business, and therefore kind of matching that to whoever you're bringing in, is so important, more important than it's ever been. Absolutely.
And we've got a couple of people in First now, and we're really focusing on that kind of that side of the business. We've got a diversity and inclusion team now, which, you know, could go back even 3 or 4 years ago, I think we have a dedicated diversity and inclusion team in First, you know, and it's great. And we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. We're not doing it because we've got a franchise commitment that says we've got to have a team of people doing this stuff. It's, you know, it's important, and we've got to get through to our employees and our prospective employees that this is a place where you can come and you can be you and you can thrive.
Exactly.
And we've got a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but we're really, really kind of investing in that stuff that's important.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's really interesting for me to hear about kind of how your career started in the rail industry, the lessons that you took from that take you into the bus side. It always, you know, you said right at the beginning, it was an accidental entry into the transport industry. It wasn't something you started off kind of like Mark Hopwood told me he was 4 years of age when he knew that he wanted to work with the railway. You know, he stood on the platform. We've got a handful of people like that, but we've also got a huge majority who have come into the industry. I remember somebody telling me I came in on an 8-week contract and I've been here 27 years. And it's an industry that as public transport, as we've said, we're providing a service, we're providing a really important service to the community. And once you're in it, I wouldn't want to work anywhere else. I find it absolutely fascinating. But
one of my colleagues called me a bus person a couple of months ago, and I think I was initially kind of taken aback by it, but I think they meant it as a compliment.
I would say so. I would say so. I'm really looking forward to watching this kind of building the brand of the bus taking shape, and kind of watching that journey. We've certainly kind of seen so much energy coming out of the bus industry over the last few months in terms of people really wanting to make that change and transformation happen around the brand. So we will continue to be cheerleaders. Our Caroline's got a big red hands that she waves around at every occasion for the Catch the Bus month, but she uses them every month. But I really appreciate you giving me the time, Simon, to share your career story, to talk to us about your 3 wishes, and it's been really, really interesting for me to hear that your journey so far. Thank you for joining me on the Intuitive Insights podcast. Cheers. Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. My huge thanks to Simon Pearson, Chief Commercial Officer for First Bus, for joining me on this episode of the Intuitive Insights podcast. And thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed it.